think it's another experience of understanding the world from somebody else's perspective.
I suppose it just shows you how really different other people's lives can be.
It's quite literally the act of putting yourself in somebody else's shoes.
A Mile in My Shoes is a pop-up installation where you walk in to an oversized shoebox. A shop assistant asks you your shoe size and they say, hey, here's a pair of shoes for you. And while you're walking in those shoes, listen to the story of the person whose shoes they belong to.
You know, this access to stories from people who you might have never met, you might have, never engaged with.
The stories of other individuals coming from different walks of life.
A plethora of voices from backgrounds that are wide-ranging. Having the shoes on really supports that listening.
There's something about literally being grounded in someone else's shoes and having their voice so close in your head. You feel transformed.
This is one of the most immersive and interactive experiences I've ever encountered with. Very personal and unique.
The power of hearing the stories from the person's mouth, the power of hearing directly from somebody's experience, and how that changed the way that I looked at the world.
It was really moving. I think it was really intimate to have such personal storytelling.
It does kind of give you that sort of interactive insight to it.
I'm blind, means I can't see the world around me, but there's so much about the world than just the visual. For me, it's just very profound and I feel almost a privilege having worn their shoes for a while.
The Melbourne iteration of A Mile in My Shoes features 23 new stories from Victorians and an additional 12 stories from the Empathy Museum's collection.
Empathy Museum is a collaboration between philosopher Roman Krznaric, who is actually from Australia, and the artist Clare Patey. Roman wrote a book about empathy, and one of his ideas in the book is that empathy is a skill that you can learn. And then Claire's role in that was to respond with arts projects or experiences where people can practice empathy.
I listened to people describing what empathy meant to them, and often people describe it as either being about seeing the world through somebody else's eyes or walking in their shoes.
I'd like to think that the Empathy Museum is setting an example of really high quality, socially engaged arts practice that can exist in public spaces that help people connect.
This is now the 7th Betty Amsden participation project, and she loved nothing more than seeing people coming in and enjoying their arts centre. She was also very interested in connecting people to each other, and she saw these kind of programs as a way to bring people together to experience things in a group rather than in an isolated way.
First principle of war, if you're ever going to get in one, and I so strongly recommend that we don't, is selection and maintenance of the aim. There was no aim in Vietnam. We didn't know whether we were supposed to be beating North Vietnam or Chinese or whatever.
I think Fern taught me to be more empathetic because I had to really change the way I viewed the world to understand her and to listen to her and to listen in new ways that I hadn't before.
Yeah, just got in and she said it's called A Big Issue and we're selling it to support homeless, and that's where most homeless is, where they're a bit crook in the mind or something and they can't go to work. If they can go out on the street and do this thing to help the homeless, and
I feel it's never been more important than right now to do a project like A Mile in My Shoes. There is so much going on around us globally. There is so much hostility and there's so much social isolation and loneliness.
We are losing spaces in public areas in which to connect and to share stories. Public realm art, such as these, is an opportunity to build empathy through listening, through connecting, through sharing. People often remark on how simple an idea it is and how an audio file and a pair of shoes can create such an impactful experience.
We live in such a busy world. Everyone is always rushing. We're always looking at things through a screen, talking to people through a screen. To actually take the time and stop and listen and deeply listen and connect with someone else's story, I think it makes you a better person. It also reminds you of your own humanity.
We all love, we all live, we all eat, we all want a roof over our heads, we all want to look after our family and our loved ones, but we also want to look after our wider world. This project kind of reinforced that idea that, you know, we're all just trying to get along, and that's all we can really ask for.
What is good is if they can get out with something and like a message. You can try to convince people with words, but when you do it through experience, it works even better. You trigger something else. You trigger the emotion, the feelings. So, yeah.